Every once in a while, we like to talk about some of the biggest video game franchises and talk about one of the more underrated games in the series, the least talked about one. Most recently, you probably remember we did it with Batman Arkham Origins. Well, we're doing another type of thing today. We're talking about the most underrated Grand Theft Auto game, and that one is Grand Theft Auto 4. Yeah, you knew we were going to talk about this one, baby. There's totally time for another video to talk Chinatown Wars, which is another example of a game like this. But if we're focusing on the mainline series, GTA 4 is the black sheep of the family. It's me, Jake, and let's take a quick trip down memory lane and talk about Grand Theft Auto 4, the one that people don't talk about enough if you ask us. So, Grand Theft Auto 4 released in 2008, and it was an incredibly different game for the series. I mean, yes, it's a return to Liberty City, an environment we've seen before, and yes, once again, you're a crime man running around with guns, stealing cars, and doing all that, but it took a decidedly different approach to tone, storytelling, and just the general vibe that really made it stand out, and it still stands out when you stack it up against all the other Grand Theft Auto games. It's a game that, I feel like we couldn't get one like this again, even if they tried. It's just like it was like a snapshot, a moment in time that worked out perfectly. So it was interesting because first and foremost, it kind of told the story of an immigrant, someone coming on a boat to New York City looking for a new life, but with a Grand Theft Auto-y spin. There was revenge and bloodlust to it. Niko Bellic, of course, is now an iconic Grand Theft Auto character. He was born in Yugoslavia, fought in a bunch of wars, was pretty much a child soldier. He very much has seen all sorts of bad things and done bad things in his life until one day his unit, his group, was betrayed and he set out to find who betrayed him and killed all his friends. I am really kind of paraphrasing a lot of it because it gets a bit more complex than that as the story goes on. Of course, you meet a bunch of crazy over-the-top characters, but that core theme, coming to America, not only for a new life and not only to close the book on things, but also for revenge, most likely murder, it's pretty dark. And it cuts to the core of Niko Bellic's character. This is a somber, kind of depressed dude, a man just kind of constantly filled with regret and just very dreary, while still also not making the game feel like a total bummer. There was still that good rock star tone, that bit of levity dashed in here and there, where it didn't feel like you were just playing like a sad man the whole time. Because Niko's quest was ultimately to get revenge, right the wrong, and close the book on that chapter in his life. So he's like another Grand Theft Auto character, someone who commits crime, does murder, but you kind of want to root for him because at the end of the day, he seemingly wants to put this stuff behind him. The game calls it into question here and there, but it's a really fun setup. Right in one of the earlier missions, when you make your first true story kill, he really regrets it and laments it and talks about how he doesn't want to do this anymore. And that's something you just wouldn't expect from a game coming hot off the heels of something like Vice City and San Andreas. They were bold in their storytelling approach, and I think it mostly paid off. Yes, it got a little kind of out there towards the end, but ultimately it was a story of struggle, crazy characters, a look at the American way, the New York life, revenge, bloodlust. Is it all worth it? There's some tragedy thrown in towards the end, of course. And from beginning to end, the story itself was just crazy satisfying, especially with supporting characters like Roman, his cousin, who kind of gave that whole spin on things, that fake it till you make it type scam thing, but also kind of having a good heart at the same time. Just the immediate rush of Niko hopping off the boat and realizing that it wasn't like it was on TV. It's not like how his cousin told him it would be. And that's a jarring thing, especially with the setting itself. This game is like a snapshot of New York, basically just before what it is now today in 2020 or 2021. This is a pre-2008 New York, and it was very much on its way to becoming the city it is today, that we see as New Yorkers. Yes, there are still some areas that are distinctly New York, but it has also become very expensive, very fancy, and many areas and neighborhoods have changed quite a bit from their original vibe, not to mention the actual skyline of Manhattan itself. If you look at it now and look at it back from 2008, 2009, it's like a completely different place. It is a rapidly changing, rapidly growing city, and we've always seen it represented in media in different ways, from those dirty crime movies of the 70s to the issues in the 80s. The early 90s was its own thing with Wall Street. Now a lot of people just associate New York with hipsters. It's always changing constantly, and for me, as someone from here, Grand Theft Auto 4 really captured a really good moment in time of the city, especially considering it's not modeled after New York City completely. completely, it's Liberty City. It's a fictional city, but it is just very, very representative of New York. Like, down to everything. So there's Algonquin, which is Manhattan. There's Broker, which is Brooklyn, where you start out. There's Dukes, which is Queens. There's Bohan, which is the Bronx. And I gotta say, man, they did a really good job of nailing each one of those districts. I think Algonquin is the hardest one to nail just because there are so many different nuances to the island of Manhattan itself, but Dukes legit feels like Queens, down to something like Corona Heights being called Cerveza Heights in the game. The airports are where they're supposed to be. The waterfront, like the Coney Island type area, is representative of Coney Island when it was kind of at its worst. Bohan, the Bronx, actually has little differences in elevation that kind of make sense for the area. Really, it's just a place worth exploring because it captures that vibe, it captures that feeling. It's also just a great fall setting video game, and while it was released in a time where a lot of games were just very gray and brown and drab, it was kind of just a trend of video game graphics at the time, it still had an iconic look to it because it made sense for the setting. I could talk about the setting all day, but it also gave Grand Theft Auto an interesting new spin by giving the characters a lot more weight. This was the first time where we saw characters really have some physics, some heft to the way they would walk, they would control, they would run, and it was less of an arcadey feel and more of a realistic type of thing while still being fun. Now, the driving in GTA 4 is definitely divisive, so to speak. It's weirdly slippery, but it was all still a lot of fun. Running from the police, climbing, jumping, shooting, punching, all of that worked really well. It was also the first Grand Theft Auto game to really nail the heist, to really pull off a whole full heist mission and give you that satisfaction. It was also one of the first games for the time. Other games had done it slightly, but this game went all in on the whole having a cell phone thing as a gameplay mechanic. And it was kind of annoying, I'm not gonna lie. But still, it was cool for the time, it was creative, it was a novel feature. It also gave us our first online Grand Theft Auto experience, and for the time, it was incredible. Yes, it was a little soft around some of the feature departments and the technology was rougher, but still it had given a lot of us what we had imagined. Like, oh man, wouldn't it be cool if you could just play online with your friends in the city and just run around and do stuff? They gave us that. That was impressive, and I know millions and billions and billions of people still play Grand Theft Auto online, but not as many of those people give props to GTA 4, man. That's where things really started. Oh man, of course, then I forgot the DLC expansions. So there was like this time when this was a thing, and it was glorious. We thought we were gonna get like a GTA 5 single player expansion or DLC quest or something, but unfortunately it never happened. Still, back in the 360 PS3 era, we got expansions on GTA 4. First, there was The Lost and Damned, which was like $10 and released February of 2009 on Xbox 360 due to an exclusivity deal, and then spring 2010 for PC and PS3. This was all 2 years after GTA 4 released, which is actually crazy looking back at the date because it felt like it came out immediately after. But like, holy hell, it was substantial. We got to see Alderney in it, which is essentially kind of like the New Jersey area of the game. I didn't mention it earlier in the video, but here it's pretty cool. They make you spend a bit more time in it and flesh it out a little bit. The Lost and Damned follows this lost biker gang that was introduced and set up in the base GTA 4 story a bit, and they fleshed it out here because you play as a member of the gang named Johnny Klebitz. You might remember him as the random dude Trevor stomps to death in GTA 5 at that one point. Yeah, that guy. Turns out he had his own game, his own storyline, a bit more gritty and gross, and his adventure had different weapons, different gameplay elements, and it came with multiplayer modes, radio station music. Think of the adventure kind of like Days Gone vibes before Days Gone was a thing, and it was great. Then speaking of great, we also got one more expansion, the Ballad of Gay Tony, which was released not long after, where you play as Luis Lopez and get into all sorts of crime-filled shenanigans. This was kind of a bit more light, if you ask me. Like, it was a bit more weird and out there. It had some pretty exciting set-piece moments and some really wacky stuff going on, and it emphasized some of the crime hustle, but with some levity that felt kind of like the precursor to what GTA 5 became. But everything here really hooks, like I said, from the setting itself to the action, the heists, the violence, down to the weird little things you can discover, eating foods at hot dog carts to get health, all the quirks of various neighborhoods, the weapons, also by the end of the game getting your own like high-end east side penthouse apartment, getting the conclusion to that story, experiencing these characters, experiencing Nico's story, his trip to New York and his new life, really just made it so memorable. Because yes, it is absolutely one of the weirder Grand Theft Auto games. Yes, it isn't filled with like the most insane amount of wacky side diversions as the other games are. It's also not always as laugh out loud hilarious as some of the other games are, but it's got the most heart. It's got the most interesting story, it wears it on its sleeve, and it tried to do something different, and it tried to do something really, really weird for one of the biggest video game franchises of all time. We really gotta give them props for that, man, and I gotta say, Grand Theft Auto 5's little reference to Nico, I really, really appreciated. Most of you guys probably caught this line, but it was Lester talking to Michael, and he said, there was an Eastern European guy making moves in Liberty City, but nah, he went quiet. And honestly, if anything, that is like the best wrap up for Nico we can hope for. He finally got what he wanted. Some rest, some quiet, even despite some of the tragedies at the end of the game. So it's nice to know, hopefully out there, Nico is resting, despite probably killing millions of people in a video game. I don't know, video game characters deserve retirement too, right? I don't know how this works, but thank you guys for humoring us here and allowing us to talk about Grand Theft Auto 4 for a little bit. Like I said, from the story, the gameplay, some of the stuff it did for the future of games moving forward were really important and worth highlighting, and we just had fun putting this video together, so thank you for watching it, and thank you for giving a minute of your time, because we're talking about a game that isn't necessarily the top of the headlines. If you enjoyed a video like this and you do want more of it, what you can do is click the like button because that helps us, but also let us know in the comments if there's another title you'd like us to revisit. And of course, tell us your favorite thing about Grand Theft Auto 4. We want to hear that. Your favorite area, your favorite mission, your favorite character, weapon, situation, whatever. Let us know in the comments. But thank you guys for watching so much. We'll see you guys next time.